I'm a paleontologist. That's who I am, that's who I am, that's who I am.
Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Persons, and I'm the curator here at the Mace Brown Museum of Natural History. The videos you'll be seeing from me feature our fieldwork this summer in the Badlands of Wyoming, hunting for dinosaurs and marine reptiles.
I'm Sarah Bosnecker. I'm the collections manager at the Mace Brown Museum of Natural History. The videos I'm sharing are going to be some of the local collecting we've done out along rivers, and also some of the prep work that's happened since the last National Fossil Day.
I'm Dr. Robert Bosnecker. I'm the research fellow here at the Mace Brown Museum and resident paleontologist. I'll be showing a video and slideshow of field work done a little closer to home, digging up a 34-million-year-old whale from Harleyville, South Carolina.
And we just want to wish you a happy
National Fossil Day.
Day 2 of prospecting, and we saw a bone just poking out of the side of the hill, and it turns out that it might be something interesting. Scott, tell us about what that could possibly be.
Well, we don't have very much exposed, so it's really unclear exactly what kind of dinosaur we've got here, if indeed it's all one animal. But we can tell from the textures of the bone that it is an ornithischian, so it's some variety of large herbivorous dinosaur. And here in the Lance Formation, that really leaves us with 3 possibilities. Could number 1 be a ceratopsian like Triceratops or Torosaurus? Number 2, it could be a hadrosaur or duckbill dinosaur, probably Edmontosaurus. Or number 3, it could be some variety of Ankylosaur, an armored dinosaur.
We'll find out.
All appearances to the contrary, I'm now standing on a seafloor. This is an exposure of the Pierre Shale, a platy, fine-grained sedimentary deposit that was laid down back in the Cretaceous period when much of the interior of North America was flooded by a vast inland sea. And it was right here at this exact spot, more than 20 years ago, that Harold the plesiosaur was first discovered.
We also did some fossil collecting closer to home, namely Folly Beach and local rivers. There was always fossils to find along Folly Beach. Usually they're on the smaller end of things though. So when we wanted to find bigger fossils, we checked out some localities along local rivers by kayak. The fossils we found were much bigger. And I do mean much bigger. We also found all of the mud, or at least I did, getting stuck multiple times. Ashby Gale here on the left led us to these fossil excursions and let us use his kayaks. Lots of shark teeth were found and other important fossils like this leatherback sea turtle ossicle. We found a lot of sea turtle ossicles. Sometimes we got lucky and found a shark tooth still in the matrix, like this Angustidens tooth. We cleaned it up a bit using our air scribe back at the museum. The rock just flaked off beautifully. And here it is all cleaned up. It's a beautiful specimen. We trained a new crop of student workers and volunteers in the prep lab. Sam was our paid fossil preparator working on our xenoropid dolphin partial skeleton. It has a skull, some ribs, and vertebrae. After she finished prep on one side, we needed to flip it to continue cleaning it off. We stuffed the cavities with paper towel and covered it all with tinfoil to make a uniform surface with no chance of burlap getting tucked in around bones. We then covered the specimen with burlap and plaster. Once it cured, we would be able to safely flip it over and have it stay in one piece. After it was flipped, Sam was able to continue preparation.
Other projects happened around the museum outside of the prep lab. Camille here is working on reattaching the ribs to our giant Pleistocene alligator out on display. We safely reattached the broken limbs of our Carolina Keeley sea turtle using glue and wire to make sure they stay in one place and don't fall off. We also did some preventative care, making a display cradle to keep the lower jaw of our Micromystocetus safe and in one piece. This was made with sheets of fiberglass and hydrocal plaster. We then painted the cradle and lined it with foam and put the jaw safely back out on display. Using the same methods as with the jaw, we made a storage cradle for some larger skulls. They could break under their own weight without proper support, and now we don't have to worry about that. Skylar and Josh Bazak discovered and collected a sea cow skull. They started prep and then they donated it to us where we finished the preparation on it. It is now on display. We also moved and added new exhibits. Our giant Pompathier is now moved downstairs. A new Trackways exhibit is on display. And we also made some time to have some fun with new specimens added to the teaching collection. Some of our recently graduated students published on CCNHM specimens. Addie Miller published on a megatooth shark nursery discovered here in Charleston. And Bailey Fallon published her second paper on Oligocene leatherback sea turtles from Charleston, South Carolina. Well done, ladies.
Dr. Bosenecker here. Last November, a friend of the museum, Rich Familia, invited us to go check out Giant Cement Quarry for a casual, short afternoon trip where we expected to just find a few small fossils. We found something quite large. Now, this is an Eocene limestone. It's about 37 to 36 million years old. The Eocene is a pretty interesting period of time because it's the period in which whales first evolved. We had walking whales during the early and middle Eocene, and then in the mid to late Eocene we had the basilosaurid whales. So basilosaurids can be found at Giant Cement Quarry, and that's exactly what we did find. In younger rocks from the Oligocene, you can find early baleen whales, dolphins, and descendants of those, leading up to modern species. Harleyville, obviously, is in South Carolina. Close to where the shoreline would have been. The shoreline would have been roughly around where I-95 is today. Now, we went out looking for small fossils. It was a casual collecting trip. We usually try not to come back with anything gigantic. And it was also our first time out there, so the odds of finding something really spectacular were just quite low. This limestone is quarried to produce cement. This is called the pregnal member of the Tupelo Bay Formation, and it's widely exposed throughout the Low Country. We did find some small fossils. So on the upper right, we got a dwarf cow shark. On the lower right, we have an early tiger shark. Lower left, a cutlass fish. And on the upper left, my personal favorite, this is a single bony plate from the exoskeleton-like shell of a boxfish. Boxfish have sort of a rigid shell, a bit like an armadillo. They're tropical, so when you find them, it generally means relatively warm water. Mark Bunce, not shown here, had spotted some bone fragments and showed me the left and right ear bones of what could only be a basilosaurid whale. Generally, when I see people huddled over one spot in a quarry, I tend to start to sweat because I think they might be looking at something big. And this is the middle of the semester, so I didn't really have the time to devote to a big whale excavation. But we came back the next day. There's Mark on the right, Rich Familia's on the left, and there's collections manager Sarah in red. And we started uncovering lots and lots of bone, including bone that was still in the limestone, as opposed to scattered bone that had been pushed around by bulldozers. By about 11 in the morning, Sarah had uncovered quite a bit of the right lower jaw, or mandible, and it has a bunch of teeth still in their sockets. Sarah's hands are quite small, So this is a very, very little whale, fortunately for me. For comparison, here's the skeleton of Dorodon atrox, our beloved Manaya, hanging up in the library across the street. Dorodon atrox is about a 20-foot long whale, and it's known from Wadi al-Hitan in Egypt from rocks that are the same age as the rocks in Harleyville. For comparison, here's what Sarah found. So it's that section of the jaw in Dorodon. However, the size is only about half the size of Dorodon. So we think this is either from a relatively small species or it's a baby, which is just adorable. Despite its small size, the bones are scattered over quite a wide area, so we kept on digging and finding more and more bone. And finding more bone. And more bone. Once you stop finding new bones, you can start to dig trenches, which we were trying to do here, but then found more bone in those trenches. Eventually, after about 3 full days of work, we finally managed to get most of the bones outlined and capped with little plaster jackets. We still did find some more bones, though. Go figure. As the size of the fossil grew, so did the size of our crew. So we called in some favors from some friends, including a bunch of local fossil collectors who gleefully helped us out. After about 4 or 5 days, we managed to get the second largest block flipped. That's curator Scott Persons carefully chiseling down excess rock. Me on the lower left, preparing the biggest jacket for undercutting. 1 day later, we were getting very close to flipping over the big block. Undercutting a block generally requires a lot of careful chiseling, but in this case, we used a little bit of power tools. So this is a reciprocating saw or Sawzall, which Josh and Skylar Basak brought, and it really helps speed things up. Limestone, this limestone anyway, is very soft, so you can literally just saw through it. It took about 7 or 8 of us to get it flipped and then slid out of this now gigantic hole in the ground. And at the end of the first week, by now, I think this is in December actually, we managed to trim off the excess rock, leave it in place, and finish the plaster jacket and cover it with a tarp. We came back in January to get the fossils removed from the field once and for all. It took about 8 or 9 of us to actually slide it about 15 feet into the bucket of this gigantic bulldozer. And even then, we still needed the bulldozer to get it down to where the vehicles were. So thanks to the mine for helping us out transporting these jackets down the slope. And just show you how absurdly large these bulldozers are. Here it is, approaching the back of a pickup. We safely got the jackets into the pickup and into the museum, where they are awaiting opening, preparation, and eventually study.
I am a pain.